When a situation where you find that a person look like this,
not necessarily tribal or regional.
but I have said that.
We're going to go straight into the review of the papers this morning. So we kick off with the Daily Trust, and the major headline on the front page of the Daily Trust reads, Nigerians demand justice for baby Hanifa killed by proprietor. That is on the front page of the Daily Trust newspaper, and it has riders here. Why did you kill my daughter? I believe that's coming from the mother of the child. And I used 100 naira rat poison to kill her. That's the suspect. President orders prosecution as neighbor kidnaps 8-year-old and after 3 million naira ransom in Zaria. Another headline on the front page of Daily Trust reads, Mother of girl raped by aid worker in Borno demands justice. That is a story that you can find on page 10 of the Daily Trust. And then a story here that says, 1 year after Igongong invasion by Igboho, evicted Hausa leader, others seek justice. And the riders there, economic activity is still at lowest ebb, and we now live in peace, says the chief. Those are stories on the front page of Daily Trust. And talking about this Daily Trust newspaper, another story here that says, I escaped retirement plots to emerge as head of state. That is accredited to General Abdul Salami. That story is on page 3 of the Daily Trust. So when you go to the top of the page, you'll see another one that says, How research led me to hip-hop, by a Uni-Ilorin lecturer. That's on page 12 of the Daily Trust. And then AMCON takes over Ibadan disco over Polaris loan default. That is another story on page 8. So for these and more stories, kindly pick up the Daily Trust newspaper for today to catch up on these headlines.
Okay, well, with that, we'll move on to the Guardian newspaper. And right at the top, you'd find a story here that says Soludo's solution and challenges of Southeast integration. We also have bracing for meningitis, yellow fever, cholera, others that peak this season. And then Liz Ntonjira says majority of African women are still denied opportunities. The lead stories there, right on the Guardian newspaper, says how onslaught against oil thieves spiked co-fire business in Niger Delta, and you can find details of that story on page 2. And then we have a story right at the bottom there that says court demands former bank PHB director in EFCC over alleged 26.6 billion naira fraud. And we also have 2023 INEC to monitor politicians' bank accounts transactions. And moving on to some entertainment, Fioki from StarQuest to master guitarist. And right at the footnotes there, you find a story on page 5 that says Buhari lauds arrest of Kano school girls killers. And these are the stories that made rounds on the Guardian newspaper.
Next, we take a look at The Nation newspaper, which carries a headline, ISWAP kills 2, abducts 17 in fresh Chibok attack. That is a story on page 2 of the Nation newspaper. Then another one that goes, EFCC arraigns ex-bank director over alleged 26.6 billion naira fraud. On the front, that is another story on page 2 that you'll find on the Nation's newspaper. The main story on the front page of The Nation says 2023 polls, candidates must declare bank assets, says INEC. And the riders following that story, commission set to establish finance monitoring teams. Another one says EFCC, banks to be mandated to report suspicious transactions. Then 101 associations seek registration as political parties. Youth students top voter registration as applications hit 8 million. That's the major story on the front page of The Nation. Then when you go down that page, you'll find a story that said, I killed 5-year-old pupil with rat poison, says school proprietor. And then claims ransom was to pay rent for school premises. Another rider there, distraught mother of victim rains slaps on suspects. And Buhari mourns, Ganduje vows justice shuts down school. These are stories on the front page of The Nation newspaper, and you'll find the major story on page 5. Then when you go down that page again, you'll find on the bottom of the page there is a headline here, Oyetola is Nigerian News Direct's Governor of the Year. And then another story that's on page 11, Ernest Chonikon's widow, my husband died of acute pneumonia. That is a story on page 11. And when you go to page 6, the story there is Ogun declares war on kidnappers, Yahoo boys. All these are stories on the front page of the Nation newspaper. So to catch up on those headlines, kindly pick it up.
All right, moving on to the Punch newspaper, Saturday Punch. The lead story there says factional delegate lists threaten APC convention. Party may back governors. And we have writers there that says Abiodun and Mosun factions keep mum. Lai Mohammed camp awaits court verdict. And then Court of Appeal reserves ruling on Kano. Lagos faction defects to PDP. And then we have stories at the top there. Oshibajo asks UN Security Council to help rid Nigeria others of terrorism, which is a very, very, important story there, because terrorism has actually, spread so fast across the country, and something needs to be seriously done about that. All right, INEC wants DSS, EFCC, others to monitor politicians' campaign spending. And at the bottom, we also have stories that says travelers panic over Lagos-Ibadan highway kidnappings, or Oyo Ogun go after gunmen. And then Fuji music can't die. Afrobeat singers get inspiration from it, says Ayinla Collington. And we also have a story. Late Sylvester was in severe pain the day I picked him up from Darwin. Guardian tells coroner. And some other stories. One is protest rocks Edo over planned fuel price hike. NLC mobilizes in Gombe State. And these are the stories that made rounds on Saturday Punch today.
And lastly, we will look at the Business Day Weekender, which carries the story Financial Crisis Impact on the Art Industry. And then the one that says Life History, the Aku Uka's funeral and matters arising. And there's also an interview with Uloma Okoro. So to actually catch up on those stories, you look at the Business Day Weekender for this morning.
All right, now one story that seems to, be making rounds on most of the papers has to do with the death of the 5-year-old that was kidnapped by the school proprietor. And, the excuse he actually gave is the fact that, the ransom was meant to pay for the school premises. Like, there are other ways in which you can actually, get money to pay for school premises or, for buildings or some things you need. Why do you have to resort to kidnapping?
That is really not an excuse. He was just looking for something to say, really, because how has he been paying for the premises before? How did he plan to pay for the premises when he set up the school in the first place? Did he plan to keep on kidnapping children every year to pay for the school premises? Is that his business plan? You understand? So he's just looking for something to say. It's inexcusable. You can't give an excuse for something like that. The 5-year-old girl doesn't harm anyone. She has nothing against anybody. You understand? Why kidnap and kill that child? You can imagine the emotional trauma the parents are actually going through after the pains of not being with their child all through, and now to find out that the child has been brutally murdered by someone who claims to want money to pay for school premises, really.
And which is someone she actually trusts, because it's obviously someone she sees every day. And I remember back in the day, growing up, we see friends of family come in and we automatically think they're family.
Exactly.
Automatically think, they're uncles or aunts and all that. Imagine the trust that she must have placed on him for him to turn around and kill her.
We actually trust, we trust educationists, we trust caregivers, we take our children to them every day so that they can be in school and whatnot for long periods of time. Without that trust that that your child is going to be safe, you won't be able to do that.
Definitely.
But when things like this happen, it makes you start thinking twice about how you can go about doing things like that, because you have issues with friends, neighbors, relatives, and teachers now getting involved in things like this. So it's really disheartening when you read stories like that.
I saw a very emotional video of her dad yesterday, granting an interview. He was crying all through, asking why someone would do that. The baby looked so jovial, I don't even know how someone can, decide to kill her.
She's an innocent
with
child.
With a 100 naira, rat poison. Like how? You watched her while she was, groaning in pain before she died, and you had the heart still stay, and you buried her. Like, who does that?
Well, it's disheartening when you see stories like that and when you read about things like this, and it's unfortunate it's actually happening in our society, and it happens on a regular now. I mean, a lot of things actually happen that we really can't explain.
This particular story has actually gained nationwide attention, and so has a story of an 8-year-old who was actually kidnapped in Zaria and killed as well for ransom.
Exactly.
So are they moving to children now? I don't understand.
Well, children are soft targets. You understand? They're soft targets. They're physically not able to defend themselves. That's number one. And number two, children are trusting. You see a person today, you see that person tomorrow. The next time when you see that person, you're comfortable with it, and there's a trend there. All these people that actually engage in these things are people that are trustworthy. They're neighbors. They're all either relatives or neighbors or even teachers. Now, the story that we just talked about. So,
but then in the north, right, we have a lot of parents who allow their children roam around on the streets free,
exactly.
without having an idea where they are, and with the hope that once it's evening they come back home and everything.
Home, yeah.
Why won't you track your child's whereabouts?
Yes, that is something that, of course, there could be. We could look at it from both sides. You understand? Some of these people have loads of children that they can't even keep track of. You understand? So getting them out of the house is actually a relief for them, so to speak. So it does happen, and that is something that actually needs to be looked at as well. When you do not try to keep your children safe, when you don't attempt to keep your children safe, you give them as soft targets to other people that they can be able to capitalize on these things. There are lots of people who are looking for opportunities like that. Apart from the ones who are looking for ransom, you have ritualists,
and
a whole lot of other people. If you're saying, I don't have money, nobody's going to kidnap my child, somebody can take your child for ritual purposes. You understand? And it happens. Even accidents can actually occur because your child is actually not protected. So these are things that we really need to look at, starting from the home front, and then it goes over to larger society. But seriously, you cannot have an excuse for doing things like this. A 5-year-old child is innocent. She hasn't hurt anybody. She doesn't hold anything against anybody. She trusted you, and it's just unfortunate that things like this happen.
Now, this should be an eye-opener, to parents, all parents, to make sure that they know what their children, or they're more involved in their children's lives. An eye-opener, yeah.
To a certain degree.
Okay, now let's talk about the mother, the girl, that's the IDP who was actually raped by a worker in Borno State and ended up committing suicide.
Well, that's also another tragedy. You understand? These internally displaced people are also very vulnerable. You understand? They are desperate. And they're there for the taking, so to speak. You understand, for these kind of people to prey on, So, and definitely she was in an emotionally deteriorated state before even the incident happened, and that actually just pushed her over the edge, and she just couldn't handle it. So these are also things that that need to be looked at, but it's very difficult to keep track of all these things, because how many IDPs do we actually have? You understand? Where are they? Can you keep track of them? Can you keep track of all of them? And you don't even know the state of mind that they're in. They can easily be lured into being preyed upon by these predators, and these predators are around. They are looking for opportunities to actually strike. It is quite unfortunate that it ended the way it did, and we just hope that justice prevails at the end of the day.
Definitely.
When things like this actually happen, because most of the time people argue that these people usually go unpunished, even when they're caught, and you take them to court, their trials and whatnot. They'll be awaiting trial for a very long time, and then at the end of the day you'll find them back in larger society. So people actually have lost faith in the justice system. So the justice system needs to step up to be able to say, okay, fine, if this thing happens, then this sort of action will be taken, and it might serve as a deterrent to others as well.
Yes. All right, now let's talk a bit about politics and how INEC is saying they will be monitoring politicians' bank accounts and transactions before elections.
How can we not talk about that? How can we not talk about politics, actually, since 2023 is around the corner? Well, I think institutions like this can do what they can to be able to do that. And, it is difficult, you know. For example, most especially in the environment that we actually find ourselves, it's actually difficult to keep track of all these things. But if they're trying to make it, and if they came out and declared that they're going to do it, then most likely they have they've made provisions for that. For that, exactly, to be able to track, and they know what the end game is, what they're trying to achieve with something like that.
And the EFCC and banks have been mandated to report suspicious, transactions, and candidates must declare bank assets before the elections.
So what happens in a situation whereby you do declare, and then what happens? What happens after that?
And then they monitor your transactions.
But that's the thing. Well, I don't know the legal backing that it has, but as a private citizen, just because I'm a politician, well, he hasn't been elected yet.
You know, in most cases, they actually advise candidates to declare their assets before the elections, so they can actually track corruption and make sure that other assets that they acquire after their election. So
as a candidate
doesn't
now,
come from
if I declare
money.
So if I declare my assets now and I go to the elections and I fail in the elections, will they still keep monitoring me?
I don't think they will.
Okay.
I don't think they will. All right. And I think with that, we have come to the end of newspaper review right here on Daybreak Extra. We'll be back after the break.
But in a situation where you find that they must look like the same,
Not necessarily tribal or regional.
because I have said that